Hi everyone, I am Chavi. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll start with a new topic, that is void marriages. Now, what are void marriages? Where is it mentioned? So, in today's video, under Hindu Marriage Act 1955, we'll talk about what are void marriages under that act. So, Hindu Marriage Act's Section 11 of basically Hindu Marriage Act talks about void marriages. Now the question comes, what are void marriages? So void marriages are those marriages which are not considered marriages at all. They are void. Those marriages are void ab initio, which basically means they are void since the beginning. They are null and void since the beginning. So it basically means that whenever someone is in a void marriage, we will not say that they are husband and wife in the eyes of law. They are not. They are. We will not say that they are married. So if someone is in such a relationship, if someone is in a void marriage, and when one person enters into a second marriage, then that person would not be considered as that he has committed the offense of bigamy. Why? Because his first marriage was void marriage. But the offense, always keep in mind that the offense of bigamy is only and only committed if your first marriage is a valid marriage. If your first marriage is not valid marriage, then the offense of bigamy is not committed. So keep this in mind. If somebody is in a void marriage and he or she enters into a second marriage, then the offense of bigamy is not committed. So this was a small introduction or definition about void marriage. Now, as I already told, that Section 11 of Hindu Marriage Act talks about void marriages. So always keep in mind that when we'll study Section 11 runs as that after the commencement of this act. So always keep in mind that the Section 11 of Hindu Marriage Act, only those marriages are void marriages which are entered into after the commencement of this act. So all the conditions which I'll explain to you after a couple of minutes, all those conditions, if you contravene those conditions and enter into a marriage, your marriage would only be considered void if that marriage has been entered into after the commencement of this act and not before. So always keep in mind that only those marriages would be void who contravenes these conditions and are also entered into after the commencement of this act. So this thing is clear. Now the second thing is, who would present a petition before the court for its nullity? So for void marriages, although there is no need to obtain a decree from the court regarding the nullity of the marriage, because that marriage is already no marriage at all, so there is no need. But some parties, some persons think that yes, it is important to have a proof in their hand so that they can legally, without any stress, they can enter into second marriage. So sometimes parties go to the court and obtain the decree of nullity. So in those cases, the question comes, who will present the petition for degree of nullity? So the answer is that either party to the marriage can file a petition for obtaining the degree of nullity. Now keep this in mind that I have mentioned here, that is either party to the marriage, which clearly states that either party to the marriage basically means that both the parties who are in the marriage, they can only file a petition and nobody else can file. So basically, if a person has entered into second marriage and basically he has committed bigamy, then in that circumstances, only those person, like the person who has entered into second marriage and the wife of the second marriage, only they can file a petition for obtaining decree of nullity from the court. Basically, I'm trying to say is that the wife of the first marriage is not entitled to file the petition. So keep this in mind that petition can be filed by either party and nobody else. The rest of the world is excluded. Now the next part is that marriage would be considered null and void. Now the question comes, when that marriage would be considered null and void. We have studied it. I have already explained that yes, this marriage would be void, and under this condition the marriage would be void, and who can file a petition for obtaining a decree of nullity. We have discussed that. But now the question comes that when that marriage would become null and void. So that marriage would become null and void if the parties would contravene the conditions of Section 5, Clause 1, 4th and 5th. So if these three conditions are contravened, then only your marriage would be considered void and otherwise not. So always keep in mind, for void marriages, only three conditions are important. If the parties contravene these three conditions, only then their marriage would be null and void, otherwise not. Okay. Now what are these conditions? So Section 5 clause 1 talks about bigamy. So it says that no one should commit bigamy. So if you'll enter into a second marriage, which means basically you have entered into a bigamous marriage, then your second marriage would be void. As I already told, that the wife of the first marriage would not be, who cannot file a petition. But yes, she can file petition under specific relief act. That's a different matter altogether. Why? Because in today's video, we are only and only talking about Hindu Marriage Act. So under Hindu Marriage Act, she cannot file a petition. So Section 5 clause 1 says regarding bigamy. So if you have committed bigamy, you can file a petition for void marriage. That marriage would be basically void. Now the second condition is 5 clause 4, which talks about degrees of prohibited relationship, and the third condition basically is Sapinda relationship. Now what does degrees of prohibited relationship mean, and what does Sapinda relationship mean? I have already discussed in my previous videos. You can check them out. So always keep in mind that void marriages are those marriages which has contravened the condition of Section 5 clause 1, 4th and 5th, which basically means 3 conditions are, which talks about bigamy, degrees of prohibited relationship and Sapinda relationship. And yes, one more important thing, that keep this in mind when we are talking about degrees of prohibited relationship and Sapinda relationship. Always keep in mind that if the customs of the parties are allowing that party to enter into such marriage, then that marriage is perfectly valid. If there are no customs as such which would validate that marriage, then your marriage would become void marriage. So I have already explained in detail Section 5 clause 4 and 5. You can check them out. So this was the concept of void marriages. Void marriages, as I already explained, that it is mentioned in Section 11. And the second thing is that it is very important that the marriage has to be entered after the commencement of this act, and yes, the petition can be filed by either party thereto, and then the marriage would be null and void if you'll contravene the conditions of Section 5 clause 1, 4th and 5th, which talks about bigamy, degrees of prohibited relationship and Sapinda relationship. So I hope this concept is clear. Thank you so much. Bye bye.